Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Now, access to justice has over the years remained an elusive and a painful quest for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in the country. And this ends up causing untold suffering to the victims and their families. In this heart-wrenching story, our reporter Gloria Milimu examines the bottlenecks to the delivery of justice for survivors of sexual violence in Busia County, which is ranked high among the counties in the country grappling with high cases of this vice, especially defilement.
Wakati niliambiwa mtu mwenye alinibaka amefungwa, nilifurahi sana.
For many girls like this 14-year-old from Busia County, whom we shall call Nafula to protect her identity, the quest for justice once they are sexually violated is a long and tedious journey, characterized by pain and untold psychological trauma. For Nafula, it took 5 years for her abuser to be jailed, and the protracted pain she had to bear during this period came despite the constitutional and statutory provisions that ordinarily should guarantee her access to justice, but which only exist in statute. All that while, her family was tormented by the presence of the perpetrator who roamed freely in the community, daring them and teasing them as the wheels of justice ground so slowly in court.
Hata nilikuwa nikikutana naye kwa barabara, ananiogopesha na ni point, ananiambia wewe, ananiambia ataniua akinipata.
Vile alienda court, akatolewa kwa bond. Sasa vile alitolewa kwa bond, akarudi kwa mwajiri wake na ni karibu tu hapo. Sasa ilikuwa ni changamoto ya uoga.
But that was not all. Moving schools wasn't enough, and whereas justice was eventually served in her case, her family had to face a myriad of challenges and bear the brunt of a system that stigmatizes victims of sexual violence rather than protect them.
Wazazi wa huyo kijana walijaribu kuja tuongee, tuelewane, kama wana kitu wanipee tuachane hiyo mambo. Mimi nikaona huyo kijana ashaharibu mjukuu wangu, nilikasirika, ndio nikachukua sheria.
Experts say such unnecessary barriers as missing police files are an artificial, human-engineered blockades to the expeditious delivery of justice in sexual offense matters.
Waliniambia faili imepotea. Nikajaribu kutafuta hizi ofisi zote, nikarudi court, walikuwa wametuambia twende court tu. Hakuna, wananiambia hawaoni faili. Ndio nikaanza kutafuta na bwana mwingine alikuwa amekaa hapo kwa bench. Ndio mwanaume akaamka, kaanza kusunguka kupiga nao kelele, ndio kaanza kusunguka sasa wenyewe. Ndio akakuja na faili wakasema ndio hii imekuwa hapa, wame-misplace iko tu hapa.
I've been healing.
In the case of this other girl, whom we shall call Nabwiri, the theft of her innocence was through the dirty desires of a 56-year-old relative. She was only 6 when it happened. And while her parents sought justice for her, they believe the perpetrator only ended up with a slap on the wrist.
Aliposhikwa, alikaa like 2 years, akarudi. I feel like the justice system failed me because I expected him to rot there.
Defilement formed the bulk of the sexual offenses reported here in Busia County, whereas experts call for access to quality services for sexual and gender-based violence survivors in a bid to curb the menace. Gaps in the legal system continue to hamper access to justice for these survivors.
Judy Gitau, who works for an organization that seeks to end sexual violence and harmful practices, among other vices that infringe on the rights of women, says inadequate and discriminatory legal frameworks and procedures impede access to justice for many young girls and women in the country.
There's need for expedited processes, especially when it comes to minors, because there are many, especially in this region, who are violated at a very young age. We have girls who are 3- and 4-year-olds who've been violated, and it's only right that their cases are dealt with speed.
But while Gitau is seeking faster resolution of these cases, she might be fighting a losing battle. For instance, the Sexual Offences Act of 2006 does not provide for a cap on the timelines for the conclusion of sexual and gender-based violence cases, particularly where minors and persons with intellectual disabilities are witnesses.
There's need for provision on the speed with which those cases should be handled. Understandably, cases vary, and there's need for room to accommodate different actors. For example, a survivor may not be able to speak up on the first time that the case is heard, and we should have wiggle room for that.
This, according to her, slows down the wheels of justice, which are also hampered by human resource challenges at the national judiciary.
Ningependa tu, yani wakati mtoto anabakwa, wakati wanasikia mtoto amebakwa, wachukulie hizo case seriously, kwa sababu inauma hadi pia inauma hadi wazazi, hadi sisi watoto wenyewe inatuumiza sana. Sometimes ukiwa class unafikiria vile ulibakwa, wenzako wako sawa.
We've just been informed that on our way here, 2 girls were defiled last night, adding to the growing number of defilement cases reported in this county.
That now brings, from the first time I received a case in 1998 to date, it brings to 13,857 cases. You will get a lot of defilement cases are reported from Butula and Nambale.
In June alone, the Office of the Prosecution documented upwards of 600 cases of defilement. I'm not even talking about raping of the adults. I mean just defilement of minors. We haven't seen numbers as high as this. This lets us know that, yes, there are gaps in the legal system, but it also tells us that there's a social problem.
Restoring dignity and justice for sexual and gender-based violence survivors is deemed a critical facet to ending the vices in the community. However, more often than not, constraints within justice institutions, such as lack of forensic capacity, corruption, harassment of survivors, and lack of judicial independence, among other challenges, remain some of the bottlenecks to efficient delivery of justice to sexual and gender-based survivors. Busia County, according to experts, continues to grapple with these challenges.
I think first is a lack of a forensics lab here in Busia, and a lot of the tests that are being done have to be transported all the way to Kisumu, about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away, for the results to come. First, this of course visits, more cases to Kisumu, who have their own cases that they're addressing. Secondly, there's the issue of, chain of custody.
Experts argue that Section 200 of the Criminal Procedure Code, that allows for retrial in case of transfer of magistrates, not only re-traumatizes victims, but also contributes to delays in the conclusion of these cases. In this chaotic judicial environment, victims are forced to relieve their tax over and over again to different judicial offices. Many do not have the energy to keep doing this, and so they stop appearing in court and their attackers walk scot-free. However, Mary Makoha, who champions access to justice for sexual violence survivors in Busia County through her organization, says efforts to fix lapses in responding to survivors of sexual violence, as well as ensuring justice for them, have slowly begun to bear fruit.
We have trained the gender desk police officers, we have trained clinicians, we have trained the police. Recently, we trained all the chiefs in Busia County on issues SGBV. And that is because you would get a lot of kangaroo courts were being done by chiefs. I can now say that we have good officers in Busia, unlike before, where defilers were just given bonds, but we had one who was given like 9 bonds. I want a country where we don't have just a few good individuals. I want a country where we have good systems that work.
Usiangalie mambo yenye ilitendeka.
Restoring dignity and justice for sexual and gender-based survivors is paramount if the country is to win the fight against the vice. The spate of defilement cases in Busia County and other counties where defilement and other forms of gender-based violence against women remain high is a clear testament to the damage of this country's moral fabric, and fixing it calls for uncomfortable but long overdue dialogue among these communities. It also calls for sensitization campaigns spearheaded by county governments and local leadership to highlight the impact of these vices on the survivors, their families, and society at large. Gloria Milimu, KTN News.
Harambee Starlets thrash Angola 6-1 in the first leg of Women Under-20 World Cup qualifiers.